Hello, this is Patrick Malley, Chief Academic Officer for Bay City Public Schools, with important information to share in preparation for the return to in-person learning over the next couple of weeks. My message today has three parts. First, I don't think we can overstate the importance of having everyone within a school on the same page regarding the safety protocols that have been developed over the past weeks. Second, from the start of the pandemic, we have stressed the importance of fostering relationships with students and each other and extending grace when needed to ensure everyone's social and emotional needs are considered during these trying times. The importance of this won't go away once students are back in buildings. And third, our students are returning to school buildings with one-to-one technology for the first time. They and we have learned much since the closure started last year. I'll spend the bulk of my time during this video talking about how we can better prepare for technology in classrooms while supporting possible future periods of remoteness if necessary. On the topic of safety protocols, I'll keep my message brief, as I know principals will have much more to say on the topic. As you're aware, building teams have been working with our Director of Student Services and Safety and the Bay County Health Department to prepare for a safe return of students in our schools. If worried about any aspect of your building's plan, please share your questions and concerns with your principal. It is important that all of us feel confident in these safety protocols before we can successfully get to teaching and learning. As we consider the return to in-person learning, let's not forget that the pandemic has created an extreme situation for all of us. We have all been in various states of fear, anxiety, grief, and uncertainty over the past number of months. While the school buildings we'll be walking into will look the same, the people within them have all been changed by these experiences. It's essential that we take time to focus on how we can support each other and our students through the transition. While teachers will know best what is developmentally appropriate for their students, I encourage you to talk openly with them and each other about the more positive aspects of living through a pandemic. Rather than looking back at what has changed for the worse, focus conversations on what good might be in store for the future. For example, just think about what innovations are coming our way in the form of remote communications. I encourage everyone to talk more about the positive impacts that our time at home have had on our lives. For example, while I've had to work a lot since the pandemic started, being at home has allowed me to stay connected with my family more frequently throughout the day. Traffic is certainly down, and it would seem we're all much better hand washers than we were before. I think for all of us, the time we have gotten to spend together with people has felt more meaningful. Providing students the opportunity to appreciate time spent with family, participating in athletics, or being back in school will be important for staying positive. And lastly, a common positive that has come from us having to operate our schools remotely is that we've all learned a lot about each other, even if over Zoom, about technology, and about ourselves. When framing conversations with students about their experiences during the pandemic, plan appropriately to listen closely to what they have to say, to interpret what they might be feeling based on what they tell you, and to reflect on what their body language says, and to consider what their words really mean. Here are a few very practical things to consider as you plan the first weeks back in school. Focus on forming relationships first. Do not assume that students know you or each other because we all saw each other on Zoom. Consider how your class will get to know each other as part of your return plans. One way to help build relationships is to ask students to reflect on what their experiences were learning at home. What did they like about it? What did they not like so much about it? As students reflect, don't be afraid to share your experiences right alongside them. Importantly, accept that different students' experiences of remote learning will be grossly different due to their home environment. Some students may have had an endless access to resources and a solid foundation on which to learn. Other students may have struggled because of circumstances that were far outside their control. Plan for the return back with these differences in mind. This will likely be your students and perhaps your first time wearing a mask for an extended period of time. Work with your principal on a plan for building in mask breaks for individuals or your entire class as needed. And don't forget that inclusion and relationship building are not one-off chats with students and each other. We must all remain continuously committed to making sure others feel comfortable to learn. The return to in-person learning will be the first time each student has their own device that was assigned to them. In addition to expecting students to use their Chromebook safely and responsibly, we'll also expect students to bring their Chromebooks home each night to complete homework and to bring their Chromebook back to school charged each morning. This will undoubtedly require additional planning, reminders, and consequences as we grow accustomed to new norms. To help us conceptualize a typical one-to-one technology rollout, I've created a pyramid graphic that can be read from the bottom up in terms of what should come first, second, and third in planning for a one-to-one classroom. If our goal is to master one-to-one technology, we must first be able to blend instruction. Of course, this is impossible if we don't have solid day-to-day strategies for managing all of the devices. What is interesting about our rollout is we started with remote instruction. This is a good thing and will help us get to mastery more quickly, but I believe device management is so crucial to our successful return to in-person learning that I've created a number of slides with discussions to have back at each school. When a student device stops working, it's imperative we respond quickly and efficiently to reduce the impact that the resulting downtime will have on learning. With every student having a device, some will inevitably break. Technology staff have been working on new processes for repairing or replacing Chromebooks. But while working on student devices, we don't want them to be without one. With a ticket submitted to GetHelp, office staff can assign the student a loaner Chromebook to use while their assigned device is in for repair. Buildings should talk about who is responsible for submitting the ticket, the teacher or the office, before the loaner is assigned. With every student taking their device home, it is inevitable that some will forget to bring their device back to school. When one does, we will follow the same loaner process, although a ticket does not need to be submitted and the student will need to be required to give the loaner back at the end of the day. Buildings should talk about the natural consequences for forgetting a Chromebook frequently, and should also talk about who shares responsibility for ensuring loaners make it back to the office at the end of the day. While we will expect students to charge their devices at home and should include frequent reminders for students and parents in our communications, it should be expected that some students will forget or that chargers will malfunction. That's okay. When a student comes to school with an uncharged Chromebook, provide him or her access to a cord reel like the one shown. The district has ordered cord reels like this for every classroom. I expect they'll be delivered later this week. There will be times when devices are lost or stolen. When this occurs, we should follow the same procedures followed when the device is forgotten at home. Send the student down to the office for a loaner and to report the incident if they haven't already. Unless the student has a police report indicating it is stolen, we should assume the device is lost and require the student to return the loaner to the school at the end of each day. Chargers are a particular challenge in one-to-one environments. Students will frequently grab someone else's charger thinking it is their own. I encourage building teams to talk through how they can work together to keep charger loss and theft to a minimum. Some students will misuse their devices. Occasionally, unfortunately, they will even misuse their devices in a way that gets them in trouble. When this occurs, I encourage you to follow your typical classroom behavior protocols and disciplinary procedures. A common misuse of technology is off-task behavior. I encourage buildings to talk about ways to reduce off-task behavior, how much off-task behavior is enough to warrant disciplinary action, and what the appropriate natural consequence for chronic misuse is in a one-to-one environment. Keep in mind that taking a Chromebook away may not be possible when the Chromebook is needed to access necessary school resources. Because classroom management is so important, here are a few questions for teachers to consider prior to the first day students are back in person. How will you reinforce at-home charging each day? I brought this up before because it's a lifesaver. It keeps cords off the ground, saves time, and saves stress. How will students use devices in your class? At the upper elementary or secondary level, I encourage students to start each class by logging into Google Classroom, reading the agenda, and completing a small task to get them started while you take attendance and manage any issues before learning can occur. Regardless, being clear about when and how the device will be used before an issue arises will be a lifesaver down the road. How will you respond when some students do not go to the sites you direct them to? If you've worked with students in a computer lab, you might be familiar with this. But if it's in your classroom every day, how will you ensure getting off task isn't an option? While the district will be providing training on a classroom management solution on Chromebooks called GoGuardian, this tool won't allow you to see everything. How will you plan to monitor students to ensure they stay on task while working on their Chromebooks? And perhaps most importantly, when students are engaged in work on their Chromebooks, how will you cue them that you need their attention? The following video provides a great example of this. I strongly encourage buildings to come together on a common phrase that it reinforces this type of behavior.
If I could have professional courtesy, please go ahead and put your machines at half mast. Professional courtesy, it's a call to every person in the space for their eyes and ears to be focused in that moment on the teacher. And what professional courtesy looks like is Computers are at half-mast, headphones are out, and students are completely present with the teacher in that moment.
You guys can give me professional courtesy. You can half-mast your computers.
Because so much of what we do is self-guided and students are really working on their own things so often, that makes the moments of bringing them all back really important. And we're very intentional about explaining what that term means and the expectation associated with it. Ladies and gentlemen, please give your professional courtesy to your colleague.
Once we have devices managed in our classrooms, what do we do with them to support learning? In part, we continue doing some of what we have been doing already. Some of you may recall this graphic created for parents back in August. Blended learning was our phrase for describing in-person learning that leveraged technology by providing agendas, resources, and homework on Seesaw or Google Classroom. This allows students to stay connected to classwork whether in class or absent for a day of school. You may also recall this graphic that guided parents through the basics of what remote learning would look like. Let's focus only on what is on the left side of the graphic for a second, as it describes what will still be needed for us to continue with blended learning once back in person. Each class should still start with a daily agenda. The daily agenda can be considered your student-facing lesson plan. It should be written in a student-friendly language and should contain links and references to the work students are expected to complete, just as it did while remote. As part of each lesson, any resource or assignments the students are expected to complete should continue to be provided on Seesaw or Google Classroom as we did while remote as well. I want to be clear though, while in person, all instruction, assessments, and support will only be in person. The district has no expectation that teachers provide video instruction to cohorts of students that are absent while also providing instruction to students in person when they're in front of them. That said, before students walk through our doors, it's imperative that we think ahead for ways that we might use technology to blend daily instructions so that learning can continue for absent or quarantined students. One of the benefits of blended instruction in one-to-one environments is that it puts an end to the "what did I miss while I was absent" question, because the answer is always the same. By training students and parents to go to Seesaw or Google Classroom if absent, we are doing ourselves a great service down the road. Another benefit is that anything added to Google Classroom or Seesaw will already be there when you go back to plan for blended instruction again next year. Blended instruction is not just a pandemic thing, it's a best practice for one-to-one schools too. We've all gotten better at grading online submitted assignments. While some assignments don't work well online, others work perfectly fine or better on Google Classroom, iExcel, or another platform. When all learning is directed to the same place online each day, it creates an ideal launching point for other learning to occur and avoids questions about how to get someplace or where to find a document. I appreciate your time today. Thank you for watching. We will spend more time learning about one-to-one technology at our 4.5-hour PD day coming up on October 23rd. Until then, I know you have much to talk about at your building as you prepare for the safe return of our students with technology. As always, please reach out if there is any way I can serve you better.